Tata Consultancy Services said over the weekend that it plans to lay off 2% of its workforce. This decision would affect about 12,000 of its employees. This is likely the largest headcount that TCS has ever considered laying off. Why is this happening? Is artificial intelligence finally taking over some human tasks completely? And don't sign off before you watch this segment of our video where we cite research that shows that companies that cut other costs before laying off employees tend to perform better over time. Hello and welcome back to Business Matters at the Hindu with me, K. Bharat Kumar. Media reports indicate that Tata Consultancy Services CEO K. Krithivasan has clarified that the intended layoffs were not a consequence of artificial intelligence taking over some tasks, but that it was a skills mismatch, that is, skills that were required for servicing clients were not matching with some of the skills that these individuals possessed. In a statement, Industry Association NASSCOM on Tuesday said, over the next several months, we anticipate some transitions as organizations pivot toward product-aligned delivery models, driven by rising client expectations around agility, innovation, and speed. The association added that this shift in the near term may lead to some workforce rationalization even as traditional skill sets are being re-evaluated. In numbers announced for the most recently ended quarter, TCS said that subdued discretionary spending and geopolitical uncertainty had led to a contraction in demand. And sure enough, if you assume constant currency, that there is no change in forex rates in the same quarter from a year earlier compared to the most recently ended quarter, TCS's revenue actually shrank about 3%, which is pretty unusual for the IT industry. In April this year, Infosys saw a fourth wave of fresher layoffs resulting in 195 exits, bringing the total number of fresher exits to more than 800 out of the about 2,000 people onboarded last year. A couple of years ago, Cognizant was reported to have laid off 3,500 people. More recently, HCL Technologies said that it wouldn't redeploy some of its employees because of automation aiding its efforts. The company called it a change in the industry. So what kinds of job profiles would be impacted? A Business Line article cites Manpower Consultants as saying that freshers are always required to get their job done with the aid of AI solutions and tools, while senior level folks, both on the management and technology fronts, are always required to steer projects. It's the middle level folks that are likely to be impacted the most, they said. Interestingly, an editorial in the same newspaper points out that Indian tech services companies have actually been paying out more as dividend to shareholders over the years compared with how much they've reinvested in their businesses. It says, global big techs, for instance, had invested in the cloud business a decade or so ago. Today, Microsoft's cloud business, accounting for 37% of its revenues, is growing well above 20%, and Amazon's AWS segment is expanding at 17 to 18%, making up a fifth of revenues and 60% of operating profits. In contrast, Indian IT's Big Four have returned what the editorial calls a staggering amount of rupees 6.2 lakh crore back to shareholders in the form of dividends and buybacks, whereas their capital investments in that same period, that is the last decade, has stood at 90,000 crore or 1/7 the amount returned to shareholders. So clearly shareholder payouts have taken priority over seeding businesses for future growth. A study published in 2020 and conducted by Professor Wayne Cascio of the University of Colorado, Denver, showed that companies that are quick to lay off employees see diminished financial performance. The professor and his team studied 43,000 companies on the New York Stock Exchange for a 37-year period ended 2016, and they found that companies that downsize when performance isn't bad don't do as well 2 years later. The study observed that the more pain a company tolerates through pay cuts or a reduction in work hours or furloughs and other cuts before taking drastic steps, the more likely it is to do better 2 years later than a company that starts cutting right away or proactively downsizing. That brings us to the nuggets of information section we have for you every episode. Here it goes. Did you know that the Great Railroad Strike was the first and largest nationwide series of labor uprising in the United States history? It occurred in July and August of 1877. Backdropped by the long depression emanating from the Panic of 1873, the collapse of central Reconstruction in the South, and the cooperation and consolidation among owners of major industries. What became known as the Great Strike was a series of strike actions in which some 500,000 workers across various industries walked off their jobs. And here's a quiz question for this week. Which airline recently announced a layoff for the first time in its 53-year history? And here's the answer to the quiz question from the previous episode. The question was, in April 2024, Zimbabwe rolled out a new currency following a prolonged period of hyperinflation that devalued the existing currency. What was it called? Many of you got this right in the comment section. Zimbabwe launched a gold-backed currency called the ZIG or the ZIG or Zimbabwe Gold in April 2024 in an effort to mitigate the currency instability and hyperinflation that had plagued the country for decades. If you enjoyed what you saw, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe. Until we meet again, have a wonderful time ahead.